I remember as a young believer being introduced to this little book by Josh McDowell called More Than a Carpenter. It was a book that tried to show you that history and all the evidence pointed to the fact that Jesus was who he said he was. And that book was really important. It was really informative of my Christian faith when I was young. So much so that as I did evangelism as a young believer, it was always based around trying to show you that there was good reasons to believe, that Christianity was credible. I can remember in year 11 giving a talk where I put up posters around my state high school, and I gave this talk called The Resurrection of Jesus, Historically Proven. And it was designed to show you if I can just get you long enough in the room to sit down and to check out the evidence, then I'll be able to show you that Jesus is true. And I see that kind of strategy happen all the time around Easter Sunday. We get to Resurrection Sunday and we say things like this in our Sunday sermons. Look, you might not yet be a believer, but if only you would stop long enough to check Jesus out, then you'll see that he's true. I can show you from the evidence that he is credible. And that's sometimes how we invite people to our Alpha courses or our Simply Christianity courses, that this is a faith that is credible. If you'd only stop long enough to check it out, then you'd see that it's all true. Let me tell you another story. About 4 years ago, I was invited to give a talk to high schoolers by a chaplain at a Christian school, and he said, I want you to talk to them about the resurrection, and I want you to use all your skills as a historian to show them why it's true. Well, this was like the olden days again. It was like dusting off the battle armor and resuming the resurrection of Jesus, historically proven. So I entered into the fray, and I did an even better job than when I was in year 11. I gave them all the best arguments to show why the resurrection of Jesus is historically credible. And at the end of the presentation, I think most of the room yawned and kind of asked the question, do we get lunch with this? They couldn't care less. I'd given them the best arguments to show them that the evidence for Jesus was credible, and they yawned and wanted to know if the barbecue was going to be decent. What was going on? What was going on? Was my evidence faulty? Was my argument poor? Were the lines of inquiry somehow not what I thought they were? No. It's that they weren't really wanting to ask the question, is it true? They didn't even think it was possible that it might be true. I want to introduce you to a conceptual difference. It's the difference between credibility and plausibility. Credibility is when you offer to look at something and you ask the question, is it true? But plausibility is about asking whether it's even possible, whether something might be true. Imagine someone coming up to you and saying, would you like to check out the evidence that the moon is made of green cheese? We have a small group. We meet for about 6 weeks looking at all the evidence for why the moon is made of green cheese, and we'd love you to come along and find out the truth about the moon. Most people, and I include myself in that number, are not going to stop. They're not going to check out any evidence because what you are saying to me is intuitively implausible. I can't even imagine you'd be right that the moon is made of green cheese, and so I'm not going to stop and investigate something that I think is implausible. I'm not going to stop and investigate something that in my wildest dreams I can't imagine could be true. You can throw me all the cheese-based evidence in the world. It's implausible. Well, let me suggest to you that that's how some people see Christianity. That's how some people regard when you say to them, do you want to check out Jesus? The Canadian theologian John Stackhouse says, most apologetics throughout Christian history have been directed at the issue of credibility. Is it true? Nowadays, however, we are faced with the prior question, the question of plausibility. Might it be true? Is Christian argument something I should seriously entertain even for a moment? Without dealing with this prior question of plausibility, Apologetics cannot proceed to the traditional task of offering good reasons to believe. See, for a great many people today, faith is implausible. They can't imagine that it has any answers, to life, that there's a truth that's really worth believing in, that there's a life worth living. They're not looking for evidence, or at least they're not looking for the evidence that we so often serve up, because for them, Christianity can't be true because it crushes my joy. Christianity can't be true because it restricts my identity. Christianity can't be true because it oppresses the vulnerable. Christianity can't be true because it requires faith in the invisible. But Christianity can't be true because it's like reading a children's fairy tale and thinking that the characters are real. See, public Christianity in this cultural moment in the West would do well to assume that people don't just need a reason to believe. They struggle to imagine how you could possibly believe. Which means as you defend and commend the faith in the public square, there's a whole of life witness that is required. That first of all, we actually have to pray that God would actually open up a space in their mind and in their imagination to believe that he could possibly be there. But secondly, we need to also understand that we have to declare and demonstrate the plausibility of the Christian life. That it's not just arguments that we defend the plausibility of the gospel, but rather through a life. That's why creativity matters, because sometimes it's actually appealing to people's imagination that can open up a space for the gospel to come in. It's why we need godly behavior, not merely because it pleases God, but also because it's a form of public witness, and it shows that our life is consistent with our truth and that it all makes sense. Indeed, sometimes the greatest witness of all is to show the plausibility of the gospel through a well-lived life, where the proclamation and the behavior, where the declaration and the demonstration all match up. It's so often why Christians are made through seeing the witness of a life that makes sense. And so can I encourage you, as you want to declare the gospel this Easter, that it's not just simply about demonstrating the credibility of the gospel, but having a life that proclaims the plausibility of the gospel to a world that can't imagine that it might be true.